This is the Recovery Lab.
Here we dive deep into the struggles, victories, and hope that stem from recovery.
No shame, no judgment, just truth, grace, and inspiration.
Let's walk this road together.
Hey guys, welcome to the 113th episode of Recovery Lab. Woo! I'm Bryn Knox. Behind the camera over there, we got Daniel Anderson and
David Sugg.
All right, and then today we have some super special guests. We have Kevin Anderson and Raymond Kennedy. Kevin Anderson, I did it. Okay, so before we started the podcast, he said, "Don't say my name is Kevin Anderson because his name's Kevin Armstrong." So this is your fault.
It is. I planted the seed.
He did it. He did it.
Oh, man.
We have Kevin Armstrong, no relation to Lance.
No relation.
Welcome you guys to the podcast. All right, first of all, though, I want you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about where you work, what you do, and what it's like.
So I'm Raymond Kennedy. I work at Cornerstone Counseling. It's a private practice. We've got 3 different locations. I happen to be in the one in Flowood, and I get the privilege of working with a lot of young men, 10 to about 25 or 30 years old. That's my calling. That's my love. That's the age group that I get to hang out with 6 or 7 hours a day. So I've got 3 daughters of my own. Didn't have any sons. Now I have hundreds of sons. So it's been really, really sweet.
I love that. Yeah. That's really cool.
That's awesome. Kevin Armstrong. I work in private practice with Oasis Counseling. I spend most of my time in Starkville. They're 3 days a week, and I work in the Jackson area about a day a week. And I work with 18 and above. I'm a licensed professional counselor as well as a certified sex addiction therapist, which we shorten just to say CSAT. Okay. Travel back and forth 2 towns. Absolutely love working with, I do marriage and family, individual, focus a lot on addiction and trauma.
Okay, cool. All right, so Raymond, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about what made you get into counseling and just things that you love about it in particular with your clientele.
Yeah, so I got involved with a men's group about 17 years ago that's led by an individual, Phil Harden, who's kind of a mentor of mine, and he's an LPC as well. And just through my journey there, learning, just learning to be raw and be very, very open as I talk to other men about what's going on in life, not just your normal when you show up to church and people are like, "How are you?" "Oh, man, it's all good. Everything's good today."
Everybody's good.
Oh, yeah, everybody's good. How's your mama and them? It's like, this group allows you to kind of entry into how to be a little more raw with guys. And I don't know, I just started feeling a tug in my heart that I wanted to do something different. I'd been in medical sales at that point for about 15, 16 years and finally got bold enough to say, all right, I'm going to go back to school. So at 41 years old, I went back to school and started working on my master's and did it really slowly for about 6.5 years. That's how long it took me to kind of walk through the classes. But I was working full time, had 3 daughters at home, like I said before.
You were doing the medical sales full time while you were going to school?
Yeah, so I was just telling Kevin is this is the first time in 12 years I haven't either been working full time and been in school. I've been working 2 jobs because when you first step into this field, if you're the age guy we are, it takes a while to build up enough clients to really call this a full-time job. So yeah, I felt God pushing me or pulling me into it, and it's the best thing I've ever done.
And you guys actually grew up together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's coincidental that we're sitting here.
It
and
really
we have
is.
so many similarities. It's insane. So our parents were at Bellhaven together in the 60s. Our mothers were very good friends. And then years passed by and we kind of run into each other again. And now we're both in school for counseling, coming out of medical device careers.
That's so crazy.
Yep.
Very odd.
Yep.
It's like your mom's talked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
See if you can encourage this.
that's right.
All right. Well, let's get into it. I've talked about this a couple weeks ago on here about how I'm like looking forward to this episode, but not looking forward to it because it's stuff that makes me uncomfortable to talk about. But I think a lot of, women in particular feel that way. But I just want to like go on here and say, like, I'm worried about my children. I'm worried about the internet. And I'm worried about like the rise in pornography in like this internet world. Like, I didn't even realize, just to like put this out there of like it's like a full-time job trying to stay on top of making sure my 16-year-old isn't seeing things he's not supposed to see and all that kind of stuff. And the other day I went on Spotify just to check like what he's been listening to, all this kind of stuff. And I found out from someone that there's actually porn on Spotify. I'm like, wait, what? And it's these kids have like started these accounts, and it's literally like the description underneath is saying like, for those who as parents blocked your Instagram or your Snapchat or something like that. And there's things on there on Spotify. Wow. And that just, it freaks me out and it's crazy. And so I just want to talk about it and talk about what you guys are seeing in your offices.
Yeah. So first thought that comes to my mind is that what I tell clients, parents of clients or clients, children are exposed to hardcore pornography at the age of 9 on average today. And so I was born in the 60s, so I'm pretty old. Back then, it was Playboy magazines on dad's coffee table, very common.
On the coffee table?
Of course. It was some weird cultural thing in the 70s.
I got a question. Did y'all and everybody else in our generation find like a shoebox of porn out in the woods when you're like 9 or 10 years old?
100%.
Like, okay.
Yeah,
I'm just making sure. Cause like
built
me and
a fort, used it as
it was
wallpaper.
like, what is this
Yeah.
doing out here? Yeah. Okay. Okay. But that was as bad as it got. Like,
Exactly.
And there was like
exactly.
the pages were worn out and waterlogged, and you could like, what is that? You weren't quite sure.
Doesn't matter, but I like it.
Yeah.
Whatever I'm
And
looking
then
at.
Dad's, his posters.
Yeah.
And
Scrambled Cinemax
Yeah.
after midnight.
Oh,
Yeah. Hold
if you
the,
squint it, you could
Yeah.
just about.
yeah.
So
Nothing like
needless to
today,
say, we're in a much different world.
Yeah.
And these kids are exposed to hardcore stuff. Parents do not want to believe that a 9-year-old would watch that stuff. And they probably don't search it out necessarily at that age, but they do come across it. And so...
How are they coming across it?
Do you have thoughts
Let me
on that?
find it. You'll talk for a second. I've got
Okay.
a stat on the percentage of kids that come across it on accident.
So,
if I can find
and
it.
I'll just say while he's looking for that, my experience is a 9-year-old has a 12-year-old sibling who has a 13-year-old friend down the street who has a 15-year-old sibling, right? And it just follows down the line. And so all of a sudden they're exposed to this stuff, and it's exciting because it's kind of risky and they know it's bad, and so they continue to it. And just like I think social media is designed these days to just keep you scrolling,
Yeah.
right? This stuff is designed to keep you looking, keep you coming back.
Yep.
And it doesn't take long to get down the rabbit hole in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. So here's the actual statistic. And remember, this is what's reported from kids. So you've got to assume it's probably a little bit higher,
Well,
than what
yeah,
they
that's
say.
like me going to rehab and telling them I drink 6 beers a week, and it was it wasn't.
At breakfast you did. Yeah.
So self-reported 58% of kids say they have come across porn by accident just while searching the web.
Wait, say that again.
58% of kids say they've come across porn by accident just looking for other things.
Wow.
They could have been on YouTube. They could have been on whatever, any of a number of places, and it pops up. And if I'm a 12-year-old boy and that pops up, I'm going to look for a minute. I might swipe left or swipe away, pretty quickly, but it's going to be like, it could be the first thing that I don't know why, but I like what I just saw. Something about that, hit something up here that makes me want to possibly look at more. So, yeah, it's almost 6 out of 10 kids.
That's crazy.
So,
And so I cheated and looked on his little sheet. Talk
Yeah.
about that one, because I think that's going to
the
dive us
violent.
into
Holy
kind of how
cow.
serious this topic is.
okay, so we're talking about a minute ago. We grow up. If you're going to look at porn, it's probably going to be your dad or a neighbor or an older brother's, Playboy or Penthouse magazine. Okay, and that was for today's standard, that's what's on TV now. That's what's on regular TV at
Yeah.
night.
That's right.
So here's another staggering statistic. So it says over half of kids 13 to 17 years old have viewed violent pornography, including rape, choking, or someone in pain during a sexual act.
Wow.
Yeah, half 13 to 17-year-olds. That's eighth graders. That's people that are just finishing up seventh grade. Violent, and it's not like we see in a movie. You might see somebody being attacked violently. It's going to be very explicit.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, that just breaks my heart for these kids and their future partners, like talk about expectations for, in the bedroom for their future partners, like what they've grown up on. I can't imagine that being good for any marriage.
Well, I mean, never mind. I mean, marriages, are going to be put in jeopardy to these unrealistic expectations, but also just the criminality of the graduating your appetite. I mean, like looking at some of the stuff what you're talking about. Like I've never ventured into some of this violent stuff, but I have friends who have, and I've seen their progression. You talk a little bit about what that. You start off seeing maybe a two-dimensional naked picture, but then some people end up doing child pornography. And so you've got these people didn't just start looking at kiddie porn. It happened and looking for greater and greater fix, more and more. The same thing as my drug use. Same thing as like, I got to do something different to get off.
Yeah.
Is that something y'all are seeing? Is this rapid progression into this just like, is this, a criminal almost?
So the story, I'll try to talk to my kids about, like, well, I just look a little bit. It's not a big deal, once or twice a week. And so, okay, So what's the scariest movie you've ever seen? That's what I usually ask them. So I'll walk you through it. What's the scariest movie you've ever seen? Like, what movie scares the crap out of you?
There's so many. It.
That's mine, too.
Is it
So
really?
it's the newest. Back when I was a kid, it would have been Nightmare on Elm Street.
Ooh,
All
yeah,
right.
that one gave me bad
It's
nightmares.
Literally, I think I was in ninth grade when I watched it, and I didn't know what it was going to be about. My sister and her boyfriend had rented it, and the VHS tape was sitting there the next day, and I played it, and it just scared the heck out of me. Let's go with it. So it'll scare you, right? First time I watched it, it really freaked me out. So what if we watched it once a day for 30 days? What would you be doing at the end of 30 days when you saw Pennywise dancing around and stuff?
I probably wouldn't be affected by it as much as the first one. Might bust a move
Yeah.
with Pennywise.
Yeah, but if you wanted to see something, scary, what would you have to do? Like, if you want to feel that same feeling you had day one or day two when you're watching it, what would you have to do?
I would have to look for a scarier movie.
That's how we build the picture right there, because they can all relate to that. They can't relate to what it means to start watching more hardcore porn, but they can relate to that. So,
And in terms of the addiction side of this, there have been PET scan studies done comparing a heroin addict to a porn addict. And what they found is that the PET scans fired the same colors in the same regions of the brain.
No way.
So the brain's doing the exact same thing, as a, I don't know, milligrams, whatever. But you start out with a small dose, you end up a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So it's a constant craving for more. And in the world of sex addiction, it's more and different, right? More and more violent, more and more graphic.
So if they're starting out so young, by the time they're, 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, I can't imagine how much, more or less words like tolerant, how their tolerance is and what that's become.
We talk about objectification, which sort of builds this expectation of this must be what sex is going to be like when I get married.
Those poor guys.
Not happening. And by the way, we spoke about a little bit before we came on air. This is not just a male problem. I
Yes.
think we naturally think that way, but the statistics are fairly staggering in terms of female and male. It's an everybody problem. But objectification is essentially, I've grown to expect that there are certain things that need to happen for me to feel physically connected to my spouse, maybe. And it's just a disaster.
So speaking of females, so here's one stat of girls 14 to 18, 57% say that they have viewed pornography, and some studies are up to 62%. This is reported, right? So it's going to be higher than that's girls 14 to 18.
Does this count like the books that we're reading?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no, this is viewing pornography.
Okay.
Yeah.
The books are a little nuts these days.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is talking about, more in line with online pornography.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. These stats are scary.
Yeah. I don't have the number for this, but kind of speaking to what Kevin was just talking about, those 19-year-olds that become 20-year-olds, become 24-year-olds, one of the highest rate of increased use of Viagra, Cialis, and things like that are among young men.
Among young men?
Young men. I'm not saying it's the highest percentage, but the highest growth.
Yeah.
It's been in young men because things just don't work the way you think they're going to work when your brain is used to seeing something, and that's not what's in reality.
Talk about that a little more.
So if we're watching, say by the time they're 22 or 23, and Kevin, jump in if you think of something else, and they're watching fairly hardcore regular pornography, and then you start a relationship, whether you're dating the person or you're married, and the expectation's not met, and your brain's expecting to see something else or see something more graphic, there's a potential problem with erectile dysfunction, or at least, based on what they thought they'd be experiencing.
Okay. That makes sense.
We call it porn-induced erectile dysfunction.
Okay.
Because that's exactly what it is. The porn has numbed you to the point where you still need the more and the different, and it impacts your ability to have a sexual relationship with your spouse.
Gotcha. So what are some things in like the adolescent community that you're noticing, what are you noticing in your offices of how are those conversations going with these young people that are really struggling, and what do you tell them?
So, it starts with making sure you have a relationship where they can trust you. Like I said, I will talk about online pornography just for 2 or 3 minutes in the first session with any of the kids I get to meet with that are at least 12 years old, just for fear that if they never come back to my office, at least one person in their life has talked to them about online pornography, how rampant it is, and some of the dangers of it. But beyond that, it's more building a relationship. Nobody comes from my office at that age for online pornography issues. They're coming for anxiety, depression, or just helping navigate life. But we're going to get to that at some point. And if they're willing to talk to me about it, we do. And I do build that picture of what it might look like at 22 or 23 years old if they stay on this same path, how that could affect future relationships. And then when you do talk about the pornography-induced erectile dysfunction, because they've all seen the commercial for the little blue pill or a Cialis when they're in the bathtub, which is really weird out in the field somewhere. It's like, what is that? And those people are all 60, 70-year-old men.
Yeah.
And you said this is happening to 22 and 23-year-olds because they're becoming numb to what an actual sexual relationship is going to be like. And that gets them thinking. So,
yeah.
And I think just calling it out and talking about it matters. It's like, oh my gosh, he knows what I'm doing. He knows I'm taking my phone to the bathroom. He knows what I do with my phone and my iPad at night when I close my door. It's like, well, I don't, but you're a kid, so I do.
Yeah.
And I think it just opens up the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know of the main ways that they're accessing this? What can parents do? What do we do?
Yeah, and I work primarily 18 and above. I would say, though, whether it's a 13-year-old or a 21-year-old, I'm going to prescribe the same thing, which is we start by trying to block access, right? We want to get the addictive thing out of their life, right?
But is that possible?
It's difficult, I would say,
Yeah.
but it's not any different to me than an alcoholic, right? Because how often or how many times in a day does an alcoholic potentially run into alcohol? They go to get gas. They go right to a restaurant. And so we start with, I always recommend Covenant Eyes. There's a lot of different programs out there that are blockers. And
What's Covenant Eyes?
so Covenant Eyes is a subscription service that is a faith-based app, and it will allow you to set up a block on anything adult-oriented. it's also going to send an email to an accountability person. So this person is, let's say it's mom of a 13-year-old, is going to get an email that shows everything that they've looked at. Access is generally with a phone, sometimes laptops and iPads and such, but it's generally a phone these days because it's right there. Everybody's got it. And so you want to start by using something that will block access.
Will those work with an Apple device?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good question, though, because we did have something at our school, at my son's school, and they explained how difficult it is for a lot of these programs, because I downloaded Bark, and they talked about how difficult these companies make it, or Apple in particular makes it, for us to be able to control what our kids can see and what our kids can't see.
Yeah, so you want to get rid of Safari, and you want to put like Chrome, something
Okay.
like that on there. And there's even there's newer search engines that have come out, but that was generally Safari. They do design that to make it very difficult. So you can just pull it off, unload it, I guess, off the phone, and then put something on there that's a little more user friendly with some of the apps.
I got mad one day and deleted everything on his phone, including the App Store. And it took I don't even remember how we figured out how to get it back, but he was like, "You were big mad." I was like, "Yeah, I was big mad."
Big man. Dude, wow.
But Bark hasn't really worked they find ways around it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part. And so again, if we're talking about addiction, for me, it's the addict is gonna do everything they can to get the drug.
Mm-hmm.
It's not unlike probably other avenues in that respect. And so you got to involve other people, right? Who do they have as an accountability, and support person? Do they have some other guys around them that they can call and talk on the phone with and say, "Hey, I'm struggling. I really want to look at stuff on my phone, but I decided to call you instead." And really begin to buy into that. And that's a shameful thing, really hard to do until it becomes part of your daily routine.
That's interesting. Are they open to doing that?
Hesitant but open. I don't know about his age group.
Yeah.
Probably less so.
So yeah, with like, let's say you're 10 to 18-year-olds, it's a lot harder. It's more up to mom and dad to set those parameters and be the bad person. Because I mean, I've got some that realize it's a problem once we start talking about it, but for the most part, it's going to be more preventing them from doing those things. No different than when you put up the little safety gates around the house when they're little. You got to put some safety gates around their lives when they're teenagers too. And sometimes it's tough stuff, like Kevin saying, removing Safari. But man, they have access through their Xbox, through their to the Nintendo Switch. Anything that has internet access, these kids are so much smarter than we are, and they can figure it out. So limiting access where they are, doors being shut. Hey, dude, don't go to the bathroom with your phone. You're all right. You're not that important. All right. Your ninth grade girlfriend can wait. You don't have to get the text while you're there. At night, not having their phones in the room. Oh, that's my alarm clock. Well, hello. They make other alarm clocks, but just helping them navigate that. Because when they're little, it's never going to be, "Mom, I've got a problem with porn."
Right.
It's just not. They're going to deny. But I mean, when I was 12, if you'd put a stack of Playboys next to my bed in my little nightstand and said, "Ray, don't look at them," I'd have looked at them.
Yeah.
Shut the door, turn my nightlight on, and would have been my time.
That's why I feel so bad for these kids, because it's like they're set up for failure with all of this technology around them.
Yeah. I would say that, by show of hands, like whose parents, sat them down and had the sex talk? Anybody? 1 out of 5. So I think it starts with some of that type of change in the way we relate to our kids and normalizing sex, talking about sexuality. When we think a 9-year-old, no way am I doing that.
What does that conversation look like?
I think you want to be age appropriate. I think probably you go with the basic birds and the bees kind of a thing. Well, like I said, so for a 9-year-old, you're probably going to avoid a topic maybe like masturbation. Are we allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We say a lot of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, generally speaking, 9-year-olds are not masturbating. 13-year-olds are. Right. So that's an age appropriate conversation, because why introduce something to a 9-year-old that they're like, what the heck is that? You know?
Yeah.
So, but it's more of, hey, mommies and daddies, here's what we do. It's part of a God's gift to us in marriage. That's kind of what I'm thinking, right? And then as they get older, you get a little more R-rated maybe.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Making it age appropriate. Like you would talk to a 10-year-old differently and more specifically about different things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if your 8-year-old has a phone or your 7-year-old has a phone, start talking. Hey, if a picture pops up, that shows somebody without their clothes on, they may not even know what the word nudity is, but shows something that makes you feel uncomfortable at all, come tell mommy or daddy.
Okay.
I mean, because there's 6-year-olds out there with phones.
I know.
And, and no limits. And those kids aren't searching up porn more than likely, but it might pop up.
Yeah.
Come tell mommy or daddy, and that would be a great time to have a discussion about that. But if they're 9, 10, 11-year-old boy and they're getting the phone for the first time, talk to them. Hey, here's the expectation. Let dad talk to them. Let mom talk to them too. Because when a girl talks to you about what that would feel like to be, for their son to see that, it's going to mean a lot. It kind of gets to them a little bit more. Dad can talk to him, the old, son talk. But with mom, it can be a little different talk too. But don't wait. Don't wait till you found something out.
Okay.
Set the expectation and go ahead and tell them what the ramification is as well. Well, I didn't know if I looked at that was going to be bad. Say, no. I mean, we don't want you to. We trust you, or we wouldn't have given you this. But if you do, here's the consequence. If you choose to, I love talking to parents about talking with their kids about making choices, okay? Because we're not trying to have the perfect little 10, 11, 12-year-old boy or girl. We're trying to have successful, happy, emotionally mature 23 and 24-year-olds. So just letting them, if you choose to look at this, you're choosing to lose your phone for an indefinite period of time, whatever that is. But have the conversation with them that way.
I like that, giving them a choice. Do you think that would make a difference for you?
Maybe. I'm just kind of thinking, are we doing a disservice to society as parents? I mean, like even the access to, and the things we talk about. I was just hanging out with a buddy, and somebody's, there was a 18, maybe a 17-year-old boy, one of the sons was there with us doing a presentation. And one of the guys there it was a sales presentation, and he was selling some knives. Anywho, one of the dads there kept making sexual innuendo jokes about little things, little words would pop up, and it was like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I mean, it was just stupid stuff, but it was noticeable. I could tell it was making the kid uncomfortable. Well, here we are, 5, 40 to 60-year-old dudes that are kind of ha-ha-ha-ing to this, 17-year-old guy. And he's like, and we're kind of doing it like, I know what the guy was thinking. The guy throwing out these comments it's funny. We're bonding. We're kind of, but at the same time, this kid's really put on the spot here. What's he supposed to do? He's going to laugh at our jokes, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so, that's not even pornography. That's just men exposing young kids to these ideas of it's okay to objectify and talk about and to make it a game.
Yeah.
So I mean, I felt really, really uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything, So I worry that just people in general, and I'm guilty of it too, are not only allowing kids to maybe have access to this stuff, but just really not being considerate of what we shouldn't even be talking about. I mean, the TV exposure is just way just crazy. So what we're seeing on devices is one thing, but just our whole society of just talking about it, laughing about it, putting it out there, and then just being okay with it. Being okay with, kids got it. I can't stop it anyway, so why would I control my tongue when society's not? Yeah. That's the dilemma I'm kind of faced with in my real life today.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, we live in a society we so over-sexualize our kids. I mean, everything. It's just, but still taking it back to holding my iPad here, but my iPad or the phone, it's just access to anything they want to see. I mean, just getting real. I mean, from really hardcore porn, bestiality, anything you want is accessible right here.
So in alcohol and drug addiction, we talk about the disease concept. It's chronic. It means it doesn't go away. It keeps going on. It's progressive, meaning it gets worse. We don't start with one thing and stay there. It goes on to graduates to other, other doses or other chemicals. It's normally fatal. And fatal meaning it doesn't necessarily have to just kill us, but it can just wreck our lives to a point we don't want to be around and we end up taking our own lives. But it is treatable as well. That's kind of the saving grace. Are we talking about something, the same addiction where it's that same kind of, it's chronic, it's daily, it's progressive, it's
100%.
Yeah.
My experience is, I'll give you maybe a scenario that might play out in the life of a sex addict. Pornography, that becomes not enough. And so we then maybe go to webcams, chat rooms. That's not quite enough down the road. So now we're going to go to prostitutes, hookup apps, and then it progresses and progresses. And yes, you eventually, most people don't seek help until they kind of hit rock bottom, not unlike a lot of other addictions. And rock bottom is very ugly. I mean, it destroys marriages, it destroys families. It's shameful. It's like almost an extra degree of shame, I think, compared to maybe some other addictions. But yeah, highly destructive, and the shame keeps people in secrecy, even if they want out, because it's so easy to hide.
Yeah, when we were talking before we started recording, you mentioned that like the shame of it and stuff like that, and how a lot of people, when they hear someone is struggling with sex addiction, that people automatically think pedophile, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? And like, can you clear it up a little bit? Like, what people should think when they hear that.
Yeah. Why do I think it is? This is just a guess, because the world that we live in with immediate news, we got to get the big story. When somebody's arrested for pedophilia, it makes the news, especially if it's someone that, your local, whoever, like somebody that people know maybe. I think, what was the second part of your question? How do we get the story out, or how do we change the narrative around that?
Yeah.
Is we normalize it. I tell my clients, there's 8 billion people on the planet. How many of them are having sex? Just about everybody that's old enough to, and so normalize sex. It is normal. There is a healthy way to do it. We need to be talking about it, and don't one parent say to the other parent, "Ooh, that's your job. You're having the sex talk because Dad, Timmy, Mom, Susie." Sit down together and have that talk. And that way you begin to normalize the conversation. And yeah, it's gross for kids to think about their parents doing that, icky stuff, right? But you're normalizing the conversation. And so I think if we normalize it, it takes us away from the extremes.
Yeah, it was probably 10 years ago, but y'all not remember all the billboards on 55 and I-20? And it was always somebody that was involved in pedophilia. It would have it had the number of years that they'd gotten, and it was a good push. That's back when the police were doing that push to bust guys that were interacting with girls under 18, and so it did very much put a big shame or a big stamp of shame on sexual addiction, because that's how people viewed it, and it's more common. It's so much more common and much more like any other drug abuse or shopping addiction or food addiction or anything else. I mean, like Kevin was saying, it hits the same pleasure spots in the brain and works the same way.
Yeah.
I saw that same study you were talking about where they took cocaine addicts who, when they were on cocaine, they did the PET scan or CAT, whatever it is, and saw it, and then they showed that same group of people pornography, and it lit up the same way.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
So I had a childhood friend. He was about four years older than me, and I was probably 9, 10, 11, 12 when he was around us, and he was a normal kid, baseball playing. I mean, he was probably 16 or 17. I don't remember ever seeing anything crazy. We weren't into porn or anything. I wasn't looking at any porn. We didn't have access to the internet. Fast forward 15 years, we hear that he gets arrested for child pornography. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt. I was like, he started looking at stuff, and because he wasn't looking at it, talking about it, pushing it, and we knew what everybody was into then. We knew what bands you listened to. I mean, you just knew he wasn't into that stuff then. I remember I always thought, how does that happen? What y'all are talking about is that's how it happened. It's that progressive stuff. But we see that it's the same as addiction. It's progressive, it's chronic, can end up fatal, wrecking your life. In the chemical addiction stuff, we don't believe in just hardcore abstinence. Like, we can't shield the addict or the alcoholic. We can't say we're just going to hide the bottles. There's a famous line in the Big Book says even an Eskimo would show up if the guy was in Greenland with a bottle and it would wreck everything, right? I mean, something would happen. Like, shielding is not the answer in our chemical addiction. What are some of the answers besides control, besides withdrawal? Like, what do we do to kind of reframe or change the perspective to kind of help these people look at people as individuals and not just objects of pleasure?
Great question.
That is a great question.
That's a deep one. So I'm going to kind of go back to what I was saying earlier about when we have the conversation with our kids. And here's part of the importance for mom having the conversation with their sons even is most boys see this as victimless. These girls are choosing to do it. They're making a bunch of money doing this. They like this. Hey, they look like they're enjoying it too. And for a mom to step in versus a dad and say, let me tell you what, that's somebody's sister. That's somebody's daughter. That may be somebody's mom. And for the mom to have that conversation with the son, I think it might hit home a little bit more so they don't see this as just a victimless crime. Not even a crime, just victimless. You know, they don't see it as a crime at all, probably. But helping them to relate that to girls in their lives. If they have a younger sister, you know, say, hey, what if one day your sister got caught up in this? What would you think about the guys that were watching her? And just make it personal.
That's a good
That's
idea.
a great point. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So, like David was saying, like, because, you know, since we can't be shielded from everything from our, you know, things that we struggle with chemical dependency, like what can addicts do, sex addicts do to change their lives? What does that program of recovery look like?
Yeah. Well, the great thing about sex addiction is you can be in recovery and have sex. So, right, there's like a bonus.
We can't do that with heroin.
No,
So-
generally not. Doesn't go well. So it is really and truly focusing on what it looks like to get into intimacy with, right, which has nothing to do with sex. And so we will call, and I really think a more accurate term for sex addiction is intimacy disorder. We don't know how to be intimate, right? We don't have the ability to emotionally connect to our spouse in a healthy way. Can be lots of reasons for that. Traumatic background, drugs and alcohol getting in the way, whatever. But we have to learn how to have intimacy. And so thankfully there's tons of resources out there. The
Like
first one that just popped in my mind is a book called The Great Sex Rescue. And it is a Christian book written by women who really are taking a look at the messages that the traditional Christian church has sent out around sex. Not great messages, a lot of them. And so that's a really good thing, I think, for a husband and wife to read that book together, to talk about it together. It's, you know, put it on audiobook if you're heading out of town for the weekend and, you know, listen to it for an hour or two and have a discussion around it. And just repeat that same type process in really learning what it feels like to be intimate and to say, here's the emotions I'm feeling today, right? Can we talk about that?
Oh, that sounds miserable.
It can be a little uncomfortable at first.
One of my sponsors told me before I got into relationships, before I started dating, he encouraged me to go through different stages of a relationship, and he named them as like a friendship, where you're just hanging out with somebody, you're doing something. Companionship is where you're not even having fun necessarily. You're doing kind of unfun stuff, like maybe going grocery shopping or helping out. And then commitment after those two is like I'm going to hang out regardless of what's going on. And then finally, if those three stages have gone well and you decide to maybe be intimate. And whereas at the addict, what we're normally doing is we're normally taking a hostage and just we want to go straight to this intimate thing. And we've never really hung out. We haven't really been friends. We never went through any kind of companionship stage. We never really made a commitment. We just straight up said, you're the one. You know, what was your name again? You know, it happens over and over and over again. And so when I started getting into relationships, I tried to be cognizant of like, what stage if I skip something? Have I gone through just the companionship? Are we just hanging out? Because I might need to do a little bit more of that. And then if I did start making this decision, like I'm enjoying this intimacy, I want to grow this thing. But like maybe I'm not. She's not. I'm not. We haven't been there yet. And that really saved me a lot of heartache. That really did. But as there of you mentioned talking about the intimacy, it struck a chord with me. It's like we're always trying to fill some kind of a hole. There's always something that's just missing. It's not there, and so we're just like fix. We just shove it in there. And with the intimacy thing being kind of what we're lacking and kind of what we're trying to fill, what are some things from your point of view that we can do, actions we can take to get to intimacy in a healthy way?
The thing you said that was so uncomfortable is the thing that we have to be able to talk to one another. There's a tool called Phanos. Y'all ever heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So it's feelings, affirmations, needs, ownership, and spirituality / sobriety. And you run through each one of those with your spouse. I'm going to do my FANOS.
Wait, say it. Feelings.
Feelings.
So I'm feeling this kind
So
of way.
today I feel tired. I feel at peace. Had a good day at work. Right, as an example. Affirmations. I want to affirm you for that meal you cooked last night. Lasagna is my favorite. It was awesome. When you cook that, it really makes me feel loved. Needs. I need us to go on a date. I need, if it was my wife, I need you to mow the yard, maybe. Ownership. I'm going to own, right? What have I done to let you down? I need to own that. Whether it's like not completing a chore or, hey, you know what? I was exhausted and I really kind of feel like I ignored you all last night and I just vegged out on my Facebook reel, and then S, spirituality or sobriety. I say both. And, for the addict who's in recovery or trying to be in recovery, how am I today sobriety-wise? 1, not struggling, not wanting to use or act out is kind of what we call it in sex addiction world. 5 is I'm about to relapse, okay? And then how's your spiritual journey? Have you prayed lately? Are you reading anything in the Bible? Or whatever? And so each person goes through that, and it's designed to be a tool where you learn to talk like that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a year from now, you're not sitting down and going FANOS. You're just, hey, guess what? I got to own this. I just, I screwed up. I did this thing the other day and it really didn't take your feelings into consideration. I'm sorry.
My husband's going to love that one for me.
There you
He's
go.
gonna be like, what do you need to own? Oh, that's going to be annoying.
Yeah.
But it'll be good.
But that's just one tool. There's so many great resources out there. That's one that therapists use a lot in couples counseling to get couples learning how to communicate in a healthy way because we just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
It's so sad because we too often just settle for this cheap facsimile of what we really want. We want a connection. We want intimacy. We want a friendship. We want somebody's going to be there when I'm sick and celebrate on our birthdays. And we just settle for this 2-dimensional thing. It's never even coming close.
Yeah,
just never there. And that's heartbreaking.
it is.
So let's pull that into kind of what would that look like for teenagers, because we live in a hookup culture now. I mean, that's just normal for them. Hardly any of them date. It's not real dating, not the kind of dating we did, but talking to your kids, not just about not having sex before marriage or anything like that, but what does a relationship look like? What does a relationship look like when you're 14, 17, maybe when you're 19 or in your 20s as well, where you are building those true relationships? It's not just a hookup. And having that conversation, being a girl dad, it's like, hey, if he doesn't get the door, you don't get in. I'm sure they did. But, just like kind of going overboard a little bit to set the expectation of how you wanted a young man to treat your daughter, or if you have a son, how you expect your son to treat that young man treat that young woman. Once again, that might be a mom might do a better job talking to a son about it because I was the one that talked to my daughters about it. What my expectation of the boys were, maybe you give your son the expectation of how he treats a girl. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I didn't think about it that way because I'm over here thinking like, okay, well, like the man needs to talk to the boy, like man to man. But like the mom can play a big role in this.
The guys are going to end up just kind of giving the fist bump, and so, but they're not
That'd be
going to
cool.
with the daughters. The daughter,
Yeah.
I got one chance to make sure that my daughter understands, what not to do, and what to expect from a man. And by the way, I didn't do those things, so I want to make sure that they get better than I gave, you know? And I think for the mom, the same thing with the sons. So
I have a question. I know it's always been, normal's not the right word, but like common, I don't know if that's the right word either. I know it's a thing that teenage boys and girls will, you know, they'll come across pornography, they'll, you know, masturbate, they'll do these things because it's just kind of human nature. When does it cross a line into something that parents should be concerned about? When does it go from like normal teenage hormones and behavior to something that's concerning?
that's a tough one.
Stumped us.
Yeah, that's a really tough one because, you know, it's not having this as being as big an issue when we were kids. It was, you know, how far is too far for your son and his girlfriend to go, or for your daughter and her boyfriend to go. So that may be an individual thing. As far as too much, I mean, I guess at least in that case, you're with a partner, you know, so it may be more talking about safe sex and relationship more than it is, are y'all doing things too much? You know, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, probably less likely to turn into the addictive side when that's just kind of how they're interacting, because that's their dating life now. I had to learn when I got into counseling, when somebody would tell me all about their friend, oh man, this kid's got some friends. And then all of a sudden, this one lives in Seattle, this one lives in New York, this one lives in Japan. Oh, those are your online friends.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had to try not to be sarcastic because that's the world they're in now. And that's the world they're in dating relationships sometimes too. I've got a kiddo I'm seeing right now whose girlfriend lives in St. Louis, and that's his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Not like she moved to St. Louis. That's his girlfriend. That's where she lives.
Yeah.
And that's his norm. So I'm not sure what a date or, you know, sexual activity would look like for them. I mean, he's 18 years old, so I don't know. That one's tougher, being we're kids of the 80s, not kids of the 2020s.
Yeah.
So,
Thank goodness.
But like, say a parent knows that their teenager is masturbating and, you know, doing these normal teenager things. When should a parent be concerned that it's not normal behavior anymore? When does it cross that line? Does that make sense?
It does. I'm wondering the same thing. How's a parent even going to know that it's crossing a line, because the kid's not giving that information up?
Yeah.
And so unless they're caught in the act or something like that, you know, and again, I would say I kind of like having, you know, a hard boundary around pornography is never okay.
Right.
Masturbation, kind of hard to control. And in fact, you know, we masturbate. We learn that our privates feel good at a very young age.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, there is some kind of normalization of development and understanding your body and being curious and all that. And so, so I'm not sure if you're saying, well, when do we know it's headed into addiction, or
Right.
it's going into some of these areas that could get you arrested? My personal experience is that is tied more to unresolved trauma than curiosity. So, and that would probably take a little while to talk about. But when we head off into things like pedophilia, bestiality, those things, not that somebody might not stumble into that, check it out, probably won't go back because it's weird or it's but people who live in that space and that becomes part of their addiction is usually more related, in my experience, to the heavier unresolved traumas.
Yeah.
A lot of sexual trauma.
Yeah. I was wondering if, and just like a disclaimer, this is like, none of this is like reflective of like my family and my home life. Like, it's more of a lot of things that I hear that other moms are struggling with. And I just don't want it to be too much about like, hey, this is going on with my kid and this is his activity. It's more of just like a bunch of kids and conversations that I've had with other moms. I just wanted to put that out there. But I do wonder, like, because in my family, we just have addiction all over the place. And it just really runs in my family. And I get nervous that, like, well, can a kid become a full-blown addict through pornography and already have that addict mind? Like, because I know, like, with my drinking, I wouldn't say I was a normal drinker, but I hadn't crossed that threshold yet into becoming a full-blown alcoholic. And I drank so much that I ended up crossing that threshold. Can a kid, like, cross that threshold with pornography and become an addict and become addicted to other stuff because of that? Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Do you have stats on that or anything?
I don't have stats,
Okay.
but from what I've seen, I wouldn't say it's because he was looking at porn. I think it's more what you were saying earlier. He already has the propensity, for addictive behaviors. And it just, the easiest access to reflect those addictive behaviors was, well, he had access to his phone at 10 years old or 11 years old. And that was just the first thing that led to addiction. I don't think it opens up Pandora's box or anything like that. But if a child is likely to become a porn addict at a young age, well, what happens then when he does have access to alcohol or to marijuana or just kind of going down the line there? I don't think they really build on each other, though. But
Okay.
if we have some psychiatrists watching and I'm wrong, let us know.
Is there any kind of regulation or anything on do y'all know of just porn, like FDA approves different? I know there's street drugs, but there's obviously that's illegal stuff. Is everything just fair game they make? Is
I
there
think I
any?
can pull up Safari right now. We could look at whatever we want.
Well, fortunately, in Mississippi and a few other states, this is within the last year. I don't want to say the name of a website because I don't want to be a marketing agent for that. But there's the most popular, most visited website on the planet. You now cannot access in Mississippi without going and entering an age verification, which
Is so stupid.
it is, but at least maybe it gets somebody to think, and they say, "Oh yeah, I won't go to that." Maybe, I don't know.
Come on.
It stopped me from drinking until
mean-
I was 14. I'm just saying. So,
I think it's got some teeth. I don't know. I think they want it to have more teeth, but I get it. I
Yeah.
know what you're saying.
it is a start.
It's a start.
To follow up on what he was saying, if you're worried that you just caught your kid looking at porn and he's 14, is he going to be an addict? I would say not necessarily, right? But what are the other factors that are surrounding this kid's life? Who's investing in him emotionally? What kind of spiritual influence does he have or not have? Is there a history of trauma? Is there a history of addiction? All those things, just like any other addiction, those things roll into what is creating that child's propensity to medicate.
And when y'all are referencing trauma, are you referencing like sexual trauma or just trauma in general?
In general for me, but I will say this, in my practice, I can only go on my numbers, but this was hundreds of clients. About 60% of adults have an unwanted sexual episode in childhood. 60%. So pretty high.
Wow.
Yeah.
Going back a few paragraphs from what we were talking about.
You're such a therapist.
I know, but when you were talking about, when it comes to masturbation or viewing pornography, I'm with Kevin on this. It's just not acceptable to view pornography. That's it. Just set that ground rule. The masturbation part, it's hard. I mean, that's been a hot topic probably since cavemen.
Yeah.
It's like you'll go blind if you do that, and that's all I can ever say. But when it comes, you could have a hard stop on pornography.
Okay.
It's just not okay. And look, got to be careful what they're looking at on TikTok and Instagram. It may be light pornography, but there's just a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, I didn't even realize how much stuff. Like I really, truly didn't until I really started digging. And just the amount of it on Instagram, on TikTok, on freaking, I can't get over the Spotify thing.
Yeah, I had not heard that one.
Because that's one thing where I was like, okay, well, he can have that. And I want to love, because I love music and I'm a big, fan of that, and I want him to have access to music, and then come to find out that there is bad stuff on there too, and so I can't even have the music app. Like,
All I want is Spotify Premium for Christmas, please, please. It's like, oh, great.
right? It's a lot. It's a full-time job, I swear.
Yeah.
It's not going away. I will jokingly tell my clients, as long as you have a brain and a penis, lust and temptation is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
The culture we're just inundated. There's a lot of money to be made, so why would they quit doing it? And it's not going away. And so, in my client base, which is an older age, there has to be some individual responsibility to say, this is not a life I choose to live, and I'm walking away from it, just like you would in any other recovery situation, And so I'm going to get active in Sex Addicts Anonymous, just like you would go to AA, right? And you become living in a recovered lifestyle, and everything that looks like, so that you're not pulled back into a relapse type situation, which can be so destructive.
Yeah. So what I'm getting from a lot of this is like, we're not going to be able to shield them from everything, but we can, have these conversations with them and encourage this whole process of making these choices.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say it's probably harder to shield them these days than it was when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s,
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
And it'll probably be harder 20 years from now than it is now. So start the intentional conversations. Practice
Please.
emotional connection, even if you're not talking about sex. Just be emotionally connected to your children. Learn what that looks like, because it's not normal. We don't learn that in today's society.
Yeah.
Have the conversations, please, please. Start it early. And even if they never respond, even if it's a very one-way conversation, please have them. They're listening. They're hearing a little bit. You can't just say it once, because they're not hearing it all. Have the conversation. Mom, you told me, and I'm going to tell you again a few months later. Mom, really? Or Dad? But, buddy, this is important. And slowly it starts to sink in.
Yeah.
It's our job.
Yeah.
We've protecting our kiddos. We make them wear a helmet. We make them get over-vaccinated these days too. Let's make sure we're having the conversation, setting up the proper firewalls in our house. And it's not just things like bark and things like that, but setting limits on where they can have their devices. Hey, kiddo, door open. I'm just playing I'm just playing the game. Door open, dude. At least leave it cracked.
Yeah.
Just little things like that,
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. One of my mom friends, her teenage daughter, was like literally like a senior in high school. She's not allowed to be on her phone in her bedroom. And like, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Like, daughter's probably not happy, but it's a good one,
We need boundaries.
Yeah.
Mom, I'm 16. Can I drink? What's your answer? No, probably.
Absolutely not.
Yes. No, seriously.
That's when you go find the friend whose mom is like,
Yeah.
as long as you do it in the house.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you guys so much for, spending your Sunday evening with us and coming on here and talking about things that aren't the easiest to talk about. I've really learned a lot. David, I'm sure you have
thanks.
too.
We can't have this show without y'all, so appreciate you coming in and taking time out
Appreciate
of your
you
day.
having us.
Great.
It's been great.
Yeah.
All right, mamas, let's go have some conversation.
Yeah, keep that door open, y'all.
Open that door.
So there's, as a way to advertise for therapists in this area, any area, there's, at the very least, load the family up and go have a family session around it and just say, hey, we want to talk about sexuality, intimacy.
And
wouldn't that be weird?
your kiddos will hate it. And
Yeah.
like, the way we keep from coming back and feeling this uncomfortable again is for you to follow what we are saying.
There you go.
Yeah.
If there's people that are trying to deal with some of these issues we're talking about and want to work with y'all, how can they find y'all?
Yeah, so they can find me through Cornerstone Counseling. They can call the number, and it's not just me. We've got 16 really good counselors, one to meet whatever needs you have and personality that you have.
And I will say, because I will say that you are my son's therapist just for life, and he's grown so much since he started seeing you.
Thank you.
And you're just such a perfect fit for him. And I just encourage anyone, because he had been to a therapist before, and it was just kind of And my friend Robin encouraged me to get him to try it again and get him to come a few times and just develop that relationship, so that when something big does come up, because there wasn't anything big going on, when something big does come up, he's got his guy to go to. And so just knowing that we have you for his whole high school.
Thank you. But I can't confirm or deny it. But,
Okay.
whether he comes to see me or not. But.
It's just, I don't know, it's just a really great resource to have. And so you've just been great for us and our family.
Yeah.
What about you, old Anderson? I still can't
Call
believe I
Kevin
did that.
Anderson at 1-800.
So oasiscounselingms.com, and that gets you everywhere you need to go. Again, Ridgeland or Starkville. And golly, I had something really good to say after coming off of what the thought you just had. Oh, it was there's a lot of therapists, and the therapist you see may not be the best fit, but that doesn't mean therapy's bad. You
Right.
find the best fit, and there is a best fit for everybody.
There
right?
really
There's
is.
Sure.
very different personality types, male, female, addiction related, all kinds of specialties out there, and so everybody needs to be in therapy.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thank you guys. Y'all have a good week, and we'll see you next week, next Sunday, 12 o'clock.